I have officially arrived at the phase of life where everyone is having babies. So I've been inundated with baby registries and needing to buy gifts for a bunch of different people. I get that you need a bunch of things when you're having a baby. I get it. It's a lot of work, there's a lot of messes, there's a lot of different like gear that can be super helpful in certain situations. But I don't know if I'm the only one that just really gets grossed out by like the amount of waste and consumerism that's associated with having a baby right now. I just don't feel like it's necessary. Maybe I'll feel differently once I have a kid. But also just in the name of saving money for myself, I can't like buy all of these things for my friends and family every single time they have a kid. So I'm going to show you today my favorite upcycled baby gifts. It's super cheap, super sustainable, and in general they're like really quick projects because, you know, they're only like this big because the baby's only like this big. So with that, let me show you the patterns that I've made. I'm going to offer these patterns on my Patreon for members. So you can print that out for free when you become a member. It's $9 a month if you're interested. And I'll also show you what fabrics I used, what upcycled fabrics would be ideal for these projects. With that, let's get started.
So here's the plan. For my sister Julia, I am thinking of making her two bibs with this scalloped edge. I first saw this idea on Pinterest. I did not come up with it. For my friend Steph, I am thinking of making a little baby jumper. But for the fabric, I'm going to use a men's button-down shirt so that I don't have to create a button placket from scratch. So the front of the jumper will come from the front of the button-down, back of the jumper, back of the button-down, etc. And then finally, I think I'm just going to make a little name banner for my sister's baby, Jane. And that will just be all scrap fabrics that I have on hand. After a couple different iterations, this is the baby bib pattern that I came up with, and it should be suitable for 0 to 2 years old, and the seam allowance is 3/8 inch. You just need one of your main fabric and one of your lining fabric, so it's a fully lined bib. For the upcycled fabrics I'm choosing for this project, I had this gingham curtain that's cotton, this floral scrap fabric, and then this cotton skirt, which is like a thicker cotton, which I think will be good absorbency wise. And I also plan on using those ties on the skirt for the ties on the bib so that it saves me one step. Here I'm just cutting out the first pattern piece out of my main fabric, and then I will get that skirt, deconstruct it, and cut out the lining from that. Once you have your main fabric and your lining fabric cut out, the first step is going to be to attach your ties on the top of the bib. We're going to be sewing them on the right side of the fabric, which is like the prettier side of the fabric. So here I'm just pinning my ties in place at the very top of that neckline for the bib. This is what it looks like when it's sewn down, and that's really just like a temporary holding stitch before it gets permanently sewn down when we fully line it. And you can see I'm just trying to get the ties out of the way here before I put the lining piece on top of it. And as I'm pinning, I'm making sure that I'm not accidentally pinning those ties. And we're going to just leave a 2-inch gap so that we can turn it right side out once we're done sewing all the way around. So yeah, here I am sewing all the way around with a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and take extra care on all of those scallop curves. Don't be afraid to stop multiple times, lift up the presser foot and adjust so that you can keep that consistent seam allowance throughout. So now that the lining piece is fully attached, I am going to notch all of the convex curves, which are the scallops at the bottom. And notching is just cutting out basically like a half moon shape out of the seam allowance, and this will just prevent the seam allowance from getting pretty bunchy whenever you turn it right side out. So every inch or so I'm cutting out a notch. Then once you get to the neckline, this is actually a concave curve, so we are going to cut a notch simply by just clipping into the seam allowance every inch or so, like what you see me doing here. This is a helpful reference image if you forget which one is the convex and which one's the concave. Now that everything's clipped and notched, we can just turn it right side out. And I'm starting by grabbing the ties because that's kind of the easiest way to initially get it to turn right side out. And you just kind of use your fingers to like roll that edge of the seam allowance all the way out and then give it a good press. Now to close that gap that we left, we're just going to top stitch on that edge all the way around. And once you do that, your bibs are done. These are what mine looked like. And technically they're fully reversible because of the lining. So you got two cute little side options. I love this scalloped edge. Ugh. Moving on to project number 2, I have this linen button-down shirt that I've held on to for so long because I love the fabric, but I never wore it. So here I'm just deconstructing it by cutting out the 2 front panels. For a pattern, I used the Breeze jumpsuit from Etsy. I'll link to it in the description. And because I already have a finished button placket, I just folded over the button placket on the pattern and then aligned it with the button placket on my button-down shirt. And you can see here I'm just weighing down the pattern and cutting it out, and then I will flip over the first side of the pattern piece, and I just went ahead and put the buttons inside of the buttonholes to hold it in place, and then I'm just cutting out the mirror image of the front of the jumpsuit. And from here, you can pretty much follow the pattern instructions as you normally would if you were making this from scratch. I am not going to show the full process here because I think this pattern's instructions are great and sufficient. But here I am cutting out the back from the back panel, and then the first step is to finish those arm seams. So I'm lining up the 2 front pieces, right sides together with the back piece, also those 2 shoulder seams. And then from there, I'll finish the armhole edges and the neckline edge, and then sew down the side seams and the crotch seam. As it was coming together, I thought it could use a little embellishment, so I lined this lace on the armhole edge and then just sewed it down as well. So it's basically done, but one of the joys of using upcycled materials is sometimes you discover a stain or a hole that you didn't notice before. And there's this tiny stain, I don't know if you can see it. Tiny stain there, yeah. And I really didn't notice it until just now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some lace trim onto the button placket, and that will just cover that stain right up. And it's done. I think it looks so cute, and this linen is so soft and cozy. I think it's going to make such a great gift. So now we finished gift number 1, those bibs. We've also finished the upcycled baby jumper for Steph. The last thing is this name banner, and this is the pattern that I created for that. This is also downloadable on my Patreon. For fabric, I chose a variety of cottons, like this old vintage dress. There was a button down. These are old curtain panels, and then there's another curtain panel, and everything's sticking with that blue floral theme. Now to cut out each pendant, I am going to cut out 2 of each because we're going to fully line all 4 of those name pendants. For the first one, I used the paper pattern to cut it out, and then the others I just used the fabric itself as the pattern because I find that that's a bit easier. It lays flat and you don't have to weigh it down. And once you cut out all of those little pendants, for the letters, I just freehanded these. I find it's pretty easy. You can sketch it onto your fabric at first and then just roughly cut it out. To sew it on, I used a zigzag stitch, and again, don't be afraid to stop multiple times to pivot and really catch that edge all the way around. And then as a nice little finishing touch, I just hand embroidered the outline of the letter because I think it looks sweet. Once you've sewn on the letter and any finishing touch that you want, you're going to take your lining piece and sandwich them together, right sides together, so pretty sides of the fabric together. Then just pin all the way around those edges. You're going to sew all the way around with a 3/8 inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, but leave a gap so we can turn it inside out. And then before you turn it inside, well, I should say right side out, we're going to clip all of those corners. There's 5 corners total. You're just doing a little half moon out of the seam allowance, making sure not to clip the actual seam, and then just carefully turn it right side out. You can kind of massage and roll those seams to get all of that fabric out, and then give it a good press. To close that gap, you're just going to fold the top edge over by a 1/2 inch and then sew it down right on that edge, and that's going to create the channel where we'll put the ribbon through. Repeat those steps for all 4 or however many pendants you have, and this is how it turns out. I hope this inspires you guys to make upcycled gifts. I went to my sister's baby shower last weekend and she absolutely loved it and sent me photos of them hanging it up in the nursery, and it looks so good. Follow along if you're interested in more upcycling videos, patterns, tutorials, and follow my Patreon if you want the downloadable patterns. Thanks for being here and for wearing trash.